In this video today, I'm going to be completely tearing down my 2021 16-inch MacBook Pro with the M1 Pro processor. I made a video yesterday where I took the back cover off and disconnected the battery, and a lot of you thought that wasn't a true teardown. So today we're going to go in and dive a lot deeper, take out a lot of components, and take a much deeper look. If you're watching this video and you want me to make more videos like this, please like the video, subscribe, and check out our new product on Amazon. It's a 6-in-1 USB-C hub. This tiny hub here has 100 watts of power delivery via USB-C, HDMI, and 4 USB Type-A ports. You have 3 USB 2.0 ports to connect your peripherals like your mouse dongle, keyboard dongle, etc. And then you have a USB 3.0 port to connect a flash drive or any other high-speed peripheral that you might need. I'll leave a link below to the Amazon listing. It's on sale now for $17.99. So before we get started, we're gonna go ahead and fully shut down the device. And while it's shutting down, I'll run you through what tools you're gonna need today. So I've gone ahead and I've printed out a picture of the insides of this device just to keep the screws in the right spots as I tear it down. This is just a reference material. You don't need this, but it could be helpful. I also have a screwdriver with a Penelope 1.2 bit. I have a Torx 6 through 3 set of bits for the various Torx screws inside. I have multiple plastic pry tools, ESD safe tweezers, and hopefully we'll be able to take the heatsink off. So I have some Arctic Silver 5 thermal paste, some Q-tips, and isopropyl alcohol to clean the old thermal paste off. And I also have a hair dryer so I don't pry some of the adhesives too hard, so I can heat them up first, make it a lot easier. So we're gonna get started by removing the 8 Torx screws. And like I said in the last video, the back 4 screws are longer than the front 4, so don't mix them up. Now, since we're gonna be diving a lot deeper today, I don't wanna get the oil from my fingers on the internal components, so I'm gonna be putting on ESD safe gloves. I will mention it's also recommended that you have a fully ESD safe mat. This one's not. I've yet to have a problem with other devices, so I'm gonna use it, and you should have a wrist strap that grounds you as well. Now, as we talked about yesterday, there's 4 clips inside, 2 clips here that pop straight out, and then 2 clips on the side here that need to be slid out. So we'll start by prying up the sides to unpop these 2 clips. That's 1 clip popped. That's the 2nd clip pop. Now the best way I found to do this is to grab the 2 corners and pull the whole top section forward. Now we've removed the top cover, we'll take a closer look inside. The first thing we're gonna do is disconnect the battery terminal. To do this, you'll use a Torx 3 bit to take off the housing, and then you'll pop up the terminal. With these tiny screws, you want to make sure your bits are magnetized. And then we'll remove the housing. Now we'll take a plastic spudger and we'll gently pry up the battery connection terminal. We're gonna bend it back so that it doesn't short anything out on the board. Since we're doing a full teardown, we'll pull it all the way back. I don't see a great place to start, so I guess we'll start from where the battery terminal is. I'm gonna go ahead and heat up these plastic covers before I remove them, just so they go back on easier. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna open this latch here on the back side. And then once that latch is open, we'll pull the ribbon cable out very gently. We've removed the first ribbon cable here. And now we're gonna take a look at this connector. I don't see an easy way to remove this connector from the board itself, but there is a Torx screw right here. We're gonna start by taking out this screw. This appears to be a Torx 5 screw. Now we'll see if we can lift this up. And it does lift up. So now this connector is free. We'll move on to this connector. So now once we've peeled this adhesive back, we can use a plastic spudger to lift the latch on the end. And once that's lifted, we can pull the ribbon cable right out. Now we'll move on to this connector. It's going to be a very similar process. We'll lift the latch with a plastic spudger. And we'll pull the ribbon cable right out. Next, we'll move on to these Torx screws here. These are also a Torx 5. The next connection I see is this piece here. We'll go ahead and we will remove these two screws. These two screws here are Torx 3 screws. Now underneath here is something interesting that I haven't seen before. This appears to be a hex bolt, and it's in one of the motherboard standoffs. So I guess we'll address that later, but we'll keep going removing the screws. I'll give you a closer look at that. We'll go ahead and we'll lift this connector, gently prying it. The next connector is sealed with an adhesive, so we'll heat it up. Do the same process, we'll just peel back the adhesive. Use a plastic spudger to lift the latch. And gently pull the ribbon cable out. It appears that we have more Torx 3 screws covering these connectors here. So we'll go ahead and we'll take these covers off. I'm actually gonna take my gloves off. I would rather do this without breaking something than get a little bit of oil on my motherboard. You probably shouldn't do this yourself, but it's my computer, so I'll do what I wanna do. We'll pry up this connector. Then we'll get these three Torx 3 screws out. And then we'll address these two connectors. Same process, gently pry it up with a plastic spudger. I need a smaller spudger for this one because it's a tight spot. We'll do the same thing. These are also Torx 3 screws. Luckily, all of these Torx 3 screws appear to be the same length, so you shouldn't have to worry about mixing them up too much. I'm gonna go ahead and flip the device around to make it easy for me to work on. I'm gonna take a Torx 6-bit to remove the heatsink screw. So this is the MagSafe connector here. That's why this screw just flung to it. It's very magnetic. These screws appear to be part of the display ribbon cables. So we're gonna leave those in for now. If we come back later and we have to take them out, we'll take them out, but for now we won't be. We'll get our T3 bit back out and we'll work on this connector here. This appears to be the display connector to the motherboard. Underneath, there's two connectors. We'll use our spudger. Gently pry them up. Then here are the antenna connectors. There's a piece of metal holding them in. These are different screws, but they're also Torx 3. Now you need to be very careful with these antenna connectors. They can be really fragile. I also don't know if this needs to come out because I don't know if it's fully sunk through or if it's just to keep them there, but for now I'm gonna take it out. Now with the spudger, very gently pry these up. Okay, there's the whole antenna setup. After that, the next connector I see is the display connector on the other side. This is just a single one. It's really long, I don't want to bend it, so I'm gonna use two spudgers in here. So now that that's off, we can move on. We'll take our Torx 6-bit back and we'll take the other heatsink screw out. Now we can switch our bit back to the T3. We have similar connectors over here to the other side. Now we'll take our tiny spudger, pry that connector off, and we will move on to this connector here. This connector here appears to be connecting another Thunderbolt port. I can't tell if there's a connector under the SD card reader slot, so for now we're gonna leave that. We'll take our Torx 3-bit again, and we'll remove this connector. There's a similar one on the other side. There's something magnetic in here that's pulling the screws away from my bit. If I lost that little screw in the fan, that would not be good, so be very careful with that. You just saw the magnetic pull again. Then on this side, we have another one of those hex screws. Now that we've disconnected all of the surrounding connectors, we'll go ahead and we'll take out the Torx T4 screws from the inside and surrounding edges. The last two Torx 4 IC are in the back here. Now that we've removed those, we'll disconnect the fan cables. So to disconnect the fan cables, it's going to be similar to most of the other ribbon cables on this device. Pull the adhesive back, pop the latch up, gently wiggle it out. I'm going to go ahead and use the hair dryer to heat up these ribbon cables because they're glued pretty hard on there. I think the only thing left holding the motherboard in at this point are these two hex bolts, essentially. So here we're going to use a 4mm hex. And it came right out. From this point, we should be able to remove the logic board. Very gently wiggling this out. And at this point, we've disconnected the entire logic board from the M1 Pro 16-inch 2021 MacBook Pro. Taking a look at the other side, we can see the back plate for the M1 Pro CPU. We're gonna have to remove those screws if we want to expose the heatsink. And then looking inside, the fans stay inside. They look pretty low profile to me. We'll go ahead and remove one just for fun. But first, we're gonna take a look at the motherboard. So here is the bottom view of the motherboard. I'm gonna go ahead and disconnect the backplate screws. They're actually a Torx 5. And when disconnecting backplates and reconnecting them, you wanna slowly do each screw a little bit at a time so you don't put too much pressure on any spot of the CPU die. Okay, now that we've disconnected the screws in the back plate, we're gonna flip the motherboard over. Make sure you hold the heatsink. I don't know if that's all that's holding the heatsink down, but you don't want it to fall off. So now we've removed the heatsink on this MacBook. For a brand new computer, I would say that that thermal paste job is not very nice. I don't know what that black thermal paste is. It appears to be covering the two RAM dies. I don't want to put that thermal paste back on, so I am going to replace it with my own thermal paste, which is Arctic Silver 5. I'm hoping that doesn't cause a problem because it does appear to be a lot thicker than normal thermal paste. If anybody knows what this black thermal paste is, please let me know. I'm gonna go ahead and remove the thermal paste from the CPU die itself. Okay, now that the thermal paste is removed, give you a closer look at the CPU die. We'll also give you a closer look at the back plate. Now I'm gonna go ahead and remove the thermal paste from the heatsink. This heatsink seems pretty thin to me. I would assume that the extra weight in the M1 Max processor or device itself is from a bigger die, because this die looks fairly small. I'd assume the die is bigger and the heatsink, which seems to fit it perfectly, must be bigger as well. I'd say it's probably wide enough to fit 2 of those RAM chips. This feels like very bad thermal paste to me. It feels like clay that I'm scraping off. Far from perfect, but that's as good as I'm gonna get it for now. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take whatever this thermal compound is from the RAM dies, and I'm just gonna kind of put it back into its place. It looks a lot thicker than the thermal paste I have, so I don't wanna not be able to bridge the gap. But if anybody knows what this black thermal paste is, let me know. Yeah, now before I tear down more of the device, I'm just gonna reinstall the heatsink. What I'm gonna do is put a tiny bit of thermal paste randomly allotted on this die. And then what I'm also gonna do, which you probably shouldn't do yourself, is I'm just gonna dribble a tiny bit of this thermal paste on top of this black thermal paste, just to compensate for the losses. Now I'll go ahead and I'll reinstall the heatsink. I'm gonna hold it from the heatsink while I get these screws back in. Now that it's all lined up, I can put it back down. And just like we did before unscrewing this, we're gonna go a little bit at a time. Just like you're changing a car tire. Now that they're all tightened down, we're gonna give them one last crank. Don't crank too hard so you don't crack anything. Laptop CPUs are a lot more fragile than PC CPUs, than desktop, I should say, CPUs. I am curious what's under these black areas here, so I'll see if it comes up easily. So underneath here is what looks like a capacitor R22 and a proprietary Apple IC. Underneath here, then this appears to be another Apple branded chip. See a lot of very small resistors and a little chip in there. And then this black sticker just appears to be covering the SIM card connector. We'll put the motherboard to the side for a minute. and we'll look in the shell itself. We'll go ahead and take out one of the fans. Looks like a Torx T5 is going to disconnect these fans here. There may be another screw hidden under this rubber gasket because the fan doesn't appear to want to come up. We're going to pull those to the side and unscrew them. We're going to try a Torx T3 first. Now we'll try and remove the fan. It seems removable, it's just glued down. So here's the fan on the new M1 Pro 16-inch MacBook Pro. We'll go ahead and we'll reconnect the fan. We'll start with the hidden T3 screws. We'll go ahead and put the T5 screws in before we tighten those all the way. Doesn't look like the tolerances are perfect here. This is a variable slot for this screw. It's probably not the best one to put back in first. Now our fan's back in. Let's see what else we can take out. I'm not going to take out the battery because I don't have any adhesive to stick it back down with. So that's gonna stay in the device today. I'm assuming this is a BMS board for the battery. Not too interested in that, so now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm assuming this is a BMS board for the battery. I'm not too interested or concerned with that. I'm gonna go ahead and start reassembling the device. In case you wanted another look at the underside of the motherboard before I put it back in. Now, to put this in, it's gonna be a little bit tricky because all of the connectors have to be bent back and out of the way. You need to ensure that the heat pipes are under the rubber gaskets, and the SD card slot reader this side needs to go in first. The SD card slot sits under this little hinge, and it won't go in unless it goes in first. So we're gonna give this a go. It doesn't feel like it's going in properly, so I'm gonna check for more connectors that are stuck. Okay, I think it was just the rubber gasket holding it back. It feels like it's in fully now, but before I do the screws this time, I'm gonna check all the connectors. I'm gonna put all the connectors in. I found, just as I'm saying that, I found a connector that I missed. I'm gonna try and do this one without removing the whole board, because all the other connectors are in. But at the same time, I need to be very careful not to break this ribbon cable. So luckily I got it, but a couple other connectors went in the process. So before I screw anything in, I'm gonna work on pushing all the connectors back down. So I'll start that process where I started over here. So I'll start with this ribbon cable. And once it's fully pushed in, snap the latch back down. So this adhesive here appears to be stuck to the connector. So I have to pull the adhesive all the way off. I know I just did that with the tweezers, but you should really only use plastic on those connectors as they break very easily. These ones should just push down, but make sure you have the entire thing pushed in. This board over here feels pretty wobbly, so try to not push on it too hard. Okay, and now we'll move on to the display connectors. Now I'm gonna flip the device to make it easier for myself. We'll put the antenna connectors back on. These you can break putting back on very easily as well. So don't push too hard. If it's lined up properly, it will go in without a lot of effort at all. That appears to be all the connectors minus the one behind the battery, and the fans. Okay, now that we've taken care of all of the connectors, aside from battery and the one next to it, we can go ahead and we can start putting some screws back on. So I'm gonna flip the device. Now I'm gonna start putting them back on where I started taking them off. The first connector in that order would be this connector here. And to put that back in, I need to reinstall the 4mm hex screw. While I have this bit on, I might as well put the other side on. Now that those are installed, I'll get my Torx T3 back out, and I'll install these. And this odd shaped screw here is going to go towards the back, or towards the trackpad of the device. Now this screw here, look at the pattern on it. I believe that's where the latching mechanism for the clips on the back cover hooking. And before you put these screws in for the connectors, you're gonna want to double check your connectors. I'm going through now and looking at that, and I just noticed that with a little bit of board wobble, it's hard to fully push them in. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna put the rest of the Torx 4 standoff screws in. Now I'm gonna go ahead and put the Torx 6 heatsink screws back in. Now I can move back onto the connectors. The next connector I have here is the headphone jack connector. So we'll double check that it's pushed down properly. And then we will put the cover over it and install the 2 Torx 3 screws. The next thing we're gonna install is the cover for the 2 Thunderbolt 4 ports on this side of the device. And again, we're getting close to the MagSafe, so you need to really watch your screws around here. Now we're gonna put the MagSafe cover on. This will probably be the most affected by the magnets piece that we're working on. Now we'll turn the device again. Now on the back side, the first thing that we'll do is we'll attach the first display connector, or connector cover, I should say. Now that those are connected, I'll attach the Now I'm going to double check the antennas. The antennas seem secure, so we'll go ahead and we'll put the cover on. Now we'll put the other display connector cover on. I don't actually know what this connector does, but it needs its cover. Now this is another Thunderbolt 4 connector. Let me check the orientation. So this has a square end and a round end. The round end goes towards the hinges. And then again, we have one of these covers. The special screw goes towards the battery. The regular screw goes towards the hinges. For some reason, these chips that are on both sides, that they look to me like NAND. I don't know exactly what they are, but they're very magnetic. They like to steal your screws a little bit. I think I forgot what to do with this guy, but it's not the end of the world. We'll take a Torx T4 bit. We'll connect this piece back in. I remember he was in really tight, so I'm gonna try and tighten it down a little bit more. But before I do that, I'm gonna verify that it's not a Torx T5. It is a Torx T5, so let me do that so I don't strip it. Now that that's fully tightened down, we'll take this ribbon cable here, thread it through the slot, push it down, push the adhesive down, and after that, we will verify that we got everything. It looks to me like we did everything, so I'm gonna go ahead and reconnect the battery. Seems like there's a little bit of extra slack in this ribbon cable. I need to know where to put it. I think I'm just gonna put it at the end. And we'll put the cover back on the battery connector. I believe that was a T3. And now that everything's connected, the next step should be to flip it over, make sure it turns on, but I'm a gambling man today, so we're gonna just go ahead, screw the whole thing up, and then test it out. I still haven't found a great way to put the cover back on, but for now, that gets the job done. We'll get our Penelope P5 bit back out. Front screws are short. Now for the moment of truth. If you took the time to watch this video, please consider checking out our company. We have a store on Amazon. This new product is on sale for $17.99. Great little hub. Best little hub you're ever gonna buy in your life. Check it out. I'll leave the link in the description below. Now here's the moment of truth. Okay. And it doesn't turn on. So, let's figure out why. So I got it to turn on. Sorry, I had the camera off for a second. All I had to do was plug in the MagSafe. I didn't change anything else. That's all it took. Thank you guys for watching the full teardown of the 2021 MacBook Pro 16-inch with the M1 Pro processor. As of this filming, I have 15 subscribers on YouTube, so if you guys could subscribe. I'd love to make more videos, put out more content for you guys. Also, I'm not making any money off these videos, but I would really appreciate it if you checked out our brand, Elevate Computing. I'll leave a link in the description to our USB-C 6-in-1 hub with 100 watts of power delivery. And I'll also leave a link to our store where you can see our full lineup of laptop replacement parts that we sell.